Hello, my name is Francoise Molenaar, and this is That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. If you've been trying to get pregnant for a while and you feel like life has lost a bit of its spark in the process, then this is the podcast for you. Every week, I speak to experts and peers from around the globe to discover how you can connect to your feminine flow and stop trying so hard to conceive, and how to put some magic back in your life and your relationships. Are you ready to make life just a bit more effortless? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. My name is Francoise, and today I would like to talk to you about the relationship between stress and fertility. One of the things I often mention on Instagram, on my podcast, is that I want you to have a really nourished fertility journey so that you feel that you are taking care of yourself really well, that you really feel what it is that you need right now, and that overall you feel like, although maybe it's not like the nicest journey because there is this thing that you want really badly, you're doing okay. And there's a couple of reasons why I keep stressing that. First of all, this whole process of conception is about shifting to that state of doing to being. So it's about becoming really receptive and understanding that this is not something you can force or control, but that you can really invite that pregnancy in. So getting pregnant it shouldn't be so much about the goal as it is about the process, how you experience that journey. Because if you only make it about that goal, then it becomes a really hard journey very quickly. And especially, for some of us, it takes a couple of years to get pregnant. So you want to make sure that you're not putting your life on hold, that you are not just forcing yourself to do all of these things that you feel you should be doing, but that aren't actually nourishing your soul. A second reason why I want you to have a nourished fertility journey is, and that's what we'll be talking about today, is because stress has a huge effect on your fertility. So we want to make sure that you are conceiving in a way that makes you feel really good, and that it's not about, that enormous checklist with all the things you feel you should be doing to improve your fertility, but that you are really taking care of yourself in a way that doesn't put more stress on your system. And that's in the end, and that's a third reason why I want you to have a nourished fertility journey. That is what will help you conceive from a place of love, trust, and surrender. Because you can only access that way of conceiving if you have a very calm nervous system. And if you're in stress mode and if you feel like you should be working even harder or doing even better to get pregnant, that creates a lot of emotional stress, which in turn will affect your fertility, but it will also affect, or will make it much more difficult to get into that mindset of really surrendering to the journey. One thing I wanted to add straight away at the start of this episode is that I talk a lot about what you can be doing, and I assume that you are a woman or someone with a womb, so that you are the one who's actively trying to get pregnant. But don't forget about your male partner either in this regard. I'm writing an article right now for a Dutch newspaper on the quality of sperm and how that's been declining worldwide. And that it's important that we also look at the male factor here, because the quality of sperm contributes between 30 and 50% of infertility cases. So it's not to say that it always causes, sometimes there's also like an interaction between a man and a woman, but male factor infertility is much bigger than we know, really. And it's also something that's not looked at enough in treatment. So one thing that comes up a lot in the research is that we're meant to be, there's a lot of markers on sperm quality, but one is sperm concentration. So if a man has less than 15 million sperm cells per milliliter, then a man would be qualified as having subfertile sperm. Whereas in reality, the literature shows that, when your levels or when the man's sperm cells already drop below 40 million, it already decreases the chances of a live birth or a pregnancy. So the good thing is with sperm health, and the same with egg quality, there are many things that you and your partner can do to improve your fertility. And for men, it's the same as for women. Stress is a factor here. So anything that I'm talking about today about the importance of regulating your nervous system, of, dealing with stress, making sure you have tools that will help you really regulate yourself and come back to a calm and pleasant state. It's important for you, but it's really, really important for your partner as well. So let's dive in. Stress. What do we know about stress? It is a physical response where your sympathetic nervous system gets activated. And most of you probably know this as the fight or flight response. So it's what happens when you think you see a snake. Do you remember there was a while that back there were all of these videos online of cats and people would put a cucumber behind their cat? This is so funny, the cat would jump. So that was the sympathetic nervous system at work there. The cat saw that cucumber. They were just having their cat food. All of a sudden, they look around and they see a cucumber. They think it's a snake and they just jump as high as they can. So this is, of course, a really useful response of our nervous system. It's meant to be short term and it's meant to keep you safe. So when there's an imminent threat to your life, you want your body to, see that and respond in such a way. And that's also what you see happening in the system. So during the activation of your sympathetic nervous system, eyesight improves, your reflexes improve, your endurance and strength improves, your pain threshold, you feel less pain also. It activates your immune system so that you can heal any injuries if you get hurt. So it's a very useful response. The thing is, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, is that we are caught in long-term stress responses. And it's not necessarily about our survival any longer. It's just about the conditions that we have created in our modern world and in our lives that mean that we are under this constant strain. And that is problematic for fertility because this stress response, the sympathetic nervous system, it suppresses other systems in your body that are not essential for survival. But these are the systems that are essential for fertility. So one thing that happens is your immune system, it kicks into overdrive, as I said, right? It is your body trying to already make sure that you can heal any injuries that you might sustain. But when you are in a stress response for too long, it's hard on your immune system. So what happens is that either it weakens because it just cannot take the activation any longer, or it gets hyperactive. And that's when you see your body starts to attack itself. And that takes the form of inflammation. So this is something I really noticed on my own fertility journey. I've been in very stressful jobs or maybe in just a mindset where I created a lot of pressure on myself. And one thing that happened for me is that all my joints started to get inflamed, sorry. And I'm sure I had other chronic inflammation. Oh, my skin was really bad on my face. So I have very clear physical manifestations of that inflammation, but it can also happen in your gut, um, in your reproductive organs, and that has a negative effect on fertility. There is a clinical marker that's used to detect inflammation. That is the C-reactive protein, CRP. So studies have found that women with low levels of CRP, so who did not have this marker for inflammation, they had more successful cycles. So they actually conceived in cycles, whereas women with higher levels of CRP, they had unsuccessful cycles, so unsuccessful embryo transfers, unsuccessful egg retrieval procedures, also more irregular menstrual cycles. So there is a clear link there between that inflammation and your reproductive organs or their ability to function. A second thing that happens when your nervous system is activated or your sympathetic nervous system is activated is that it affects your sleep. And we know sleep is essential to mental and physical health. And you may recognize this, of course, right? When you're really stressed, it gets so difficult to fall asleep, or maybe you have really bad dreams, or you keep waking up at night, or it's difficult to fall back to sleep. So many things happen when you're stressed with your sleep. And again, we know from research that sleep has a strong effect on the female reproductive system. So it's a bit difficult to research this, but what researchers often use are women who do shift work because there are clear disruptions of their sleep patterns there. And what they see with women who do shift work is that there are more menstrual irregularities. They don't get their periods. It takes them longer to conceive, or they have increased miscarriages, lower birth weights for the babies that they do birth. So that's a clear signal there that sleep is so important for your fertility. And that's another thing that stress obstructs. Then, when we look at the gut, um, stress also affects what happens. It increases glucose in your gut and it turns off digestion. And what happens when we have these glucose spikes in the body is that your body starts to produce insulin to store that energy in your body's cells. But insulin looks a lot like the egg maturing hormones. So what happens is that your body thinks there are enough of these hormones already, and it doesn't actually produce the egg maturing hormones. And that in turn then decreases the amount of maturing eggs and may also interfere with ovulation. And at the same time, this can also contribute to an increased release of testosterone. That's the more male hormone. And we know women with higher levels of testosterone, it's a factor in the development of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, um, which is also, very problematic when you're trying to get pregnant. So stress affected the immune system, sleep, gut, and then a final way, well, there's many more ways in which stress affects the system, but a final thing I wanted to mention here is muscle tension. And you can probably feel this in your body already, right? When we talk about stress or when you think of a stressful situation, it's because you are on high alert and your body, it wants to, it's sort of ready to activate itself in the face of a threat. So it means your muscles are very tensed. And what that does, it prevents blood flow. And you notice that when you release your muscles, you can feel like, okay, everything, there's more space, things can start flowing again. Why is that relevant? Because you want good blood flow in your womb. And there are studies that have shown that blood flow in the ovarian and uterine arteries was generally more restricted in women with unexplained infertility than in fertile women. So that means that for women with unexplained fertility, there was something in their bodies that was restricting their blood flows to the ovaries, to the uterus. Um, and that's why a lot of work, not necessarily in the field of assisted reproductive technology, but if you look at anyone else who's working with fertility, their work is usually very much focused on either dealing with inflammation, such as through dieting, for example, or by really allowing for optimal blood flow in your belly, in your womb. So I'm thinking of fertility yoga, acupuncture, um, womb massage or fertility massages, just any meditative practices that focus on deep belly breathing. These are all things, I think maybe you can notice it in my voice already, but these are all things that help you really open up your womb space, open up your belly, let go of any tension that you may be keeping there, so that the blood can flow more freely. And it's something I do a lot in my guided practices as well, is I take women into the body. And that's why I love doing any womb connection meditations or ovary connection meditations. Really help women in meditation tune into their organs and feel like, does it feel like in here? Because like the women I work with, they know when there's something stuck there. And that's where we sort of enter the realm of energetic work as well. We know when there's past memories or things that happen to us when they're stuck there. They've created a physical imprint in the body. And then once we've identified that block, we can start working with that, breathing with it, seeing what it needs to release, telling your body that it's safe. There's all of these practices that you can do with the body to help it get out of that constriction and really allow for more flow to move in. So stress, not so good for your fertility, and I'm sure you knew this already. But I wanted to mention it anyway because there's also a paradox here. because most of you probably know that's, stress is problematic when you're trying to conceive, but we also know that the whole process of infertility or trying to get pregnant and when it's not working, it creates a lot of stress. And the one thing I don't want to do with this episode is say that you shouldn't feel stress or that you should beat yourself up when you're stressed out. So what I really want to look at with you today is how you can develop a toolkit that will help you regulate your stress. Because it is okay to feel stress and your body actually needs stress because otherwise it's also your activation, right? So if you were never activated, you wouldn't get out of bed. You just don't want your levels to become so high all the time that it turns into a chronic condition or that it starts to affect all of your organs in this way. So, what you want to be doing is to turn on your parasympathetic response. That's the other side of the nervous system. We have the sympathetic response, that's the fight and flight, that's the stress. And then there's a parasympathetic side of your nervous system that is rest and digest. Or I just came across this other term, which is very appropriate for this podcast, feed and breed. So when there is no threat to your survival, space opens up for you to rest and digest, to feed and breed. It's the not directly essential processes in life that are, in the longer term, super essential for our own well-being and our ability to, yeah, to stay alive here on this planet. So rest and digest, feed and breed. How can you, or maybe if we look a little bit at Eastern philosophies, I've mentioned this a lot on the podcast before, the yin and the yang side of life. So stress and that sympathetic nervous system, that's really your yang energy. It's about doing, it's about working really hard. It's about getting up in the morning and having, a plan. But we also want that yin energy. We want the place where we slow down, where we can look at what's happened to us and if there's anything that we need to process. It's where we give our system a rest, and we need both things to balance, to have balance in our lives. So if we're in the situation of chronic stress, we're out of balance and we need to really invest in turning on your parasympathetic response. A really important starting point is to get data. So start monitoring your stress levels. You can get a journal and every day, maybe at the end of the day, you write down like what your day was like. Notice or really, point out what were the things that were stressful, what were some of the things that you found really relaxing. So you get a general idea of, okay, what are my general stress levels like? What are things that are not contributing to my state of being? And what are things that I should incorporate more of? What can really help when you do this is to just set an alarm on your phone that goes off. Like when I did my mindfulness training, we had to set an alarm um, to check in with ourselves every hour throughout the day. So maybe that's a bit too intense, but see if you can set that alarm and just maybe check in 4, 5, 6 times during the day. And when you check in, just for 1 or 2 minutes, you write down how you feel. So you look at your body, you look at your mind, and you look at what you're doing. The nice thing is that this is already a practice that will help you regulate your nervous system because you create space to tune into your body and breath for a couple of minutes. So that is a really important first step that will also give you a lot of data. Some other things, like once you start noticing what are moments that you feel really stressed, you can start working with short-term solutions. So things that you can do in the moment to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So you take a little break from your stressful day. So maybe you know that you have to go in for treatment and you are afraid of what it will feel like, or there's something. Then these are things you can do. Or maybe you know that you have a very intense day at work, and by forcing yourself to take like 5 minutes every hour to do one of these practices, you're breaking that cycle. Otherwise, you would be in like stress mode all day long. But you can incorporate these resets every hour to make sure that your system has a little bit of time to recover. So I wrote a couple of things down for you. A first thing you can do, a short-term solution, is paced breathing. So that means you just breathe in for 5 seconds and you breathe out for 5 seconds. And you do this for a couple of minutes. So that's a good way to, yeah, with breath, activate your parasympathetic nervous system, refocus in the present moment, get out of your mind, get out of what it is that you're doing. Just really feel like, but in this moment, I'm safe. No matter what I think I need to be doing, in this moment, everything's all right and I'm safe. Another thing that you can do, and this is a really good one if something happens that sort of leaves you a bit shaken, is to shake it off. That's a thing that animals also do a lot in nature. So you just put on some Taylor Swift and you shake and move for a couple of seconds. Shaking is really good. Just shake your whole body. But dancing, anything that involves movement, it's so much easier to calm the body than to calm the mind. So when you feel like, okay, you just had an altercation with a friend or with your boss, or I don't know, someone shouted at you in traffic and you feel like, "Ah, my body is constricted," shake it off or dance. A third solution is to use the power of smell. It's estimated that smell affects 75% of the emotions we generate on a daily basis. And one study even found that 3 minutes of inhaling lavender essential oil make people feel significantly more relaxed. So lavender oil is always a good one to get. But any smell that makes you feel good, maybe you want to put flowers on your desk or a plant that smells really nice. Make sure that you have something nearby that you can smell and use that to remind yourself, I'm safe, I'm here, I'm enjoying this moment where I'm smelling this flower. And you can, even when I say this, I feel my body relaxing instantly. The good thing is that inhaling also engages your breath. So you need to inhale with mindfulness, otherwise, you don't smell anything. So it's a good way to take a moment, come back to all of your senses, get out of what it is that you're doing or thinking, and use that power of smell to really ground you and activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So, just to recap the three solutions, the short term solutions: paced breathing, shaking it off, and using the power of smell. But those are also like quick fixes. And when you're under chronic stress, you also need longer term solutions. One important thing to do is to set boundaries. For example, when you realize that you're under chronic stress, then things need to change. Um, but there is a reason why you're not setting the boundaries. So I created a whole episode on this, episode 71, creating fertility intentions that work, that focuses on going into these underlying patterns. So why is it that it's so difficult to set boundaries for me? What are the fears here? And how can I slowly start experimenting, getting out of my comfort zone and trying new ways of being? So if you notice that you have some of these patterns that are causing long-term stress, then it's good to look at what's underneath that. But in general, longer term solutions for dealing with stress is to set boundaries, first of all, because we are all overworked, I assume. I know if I look around me. We feel like we can do it all, and it's just setting the bar way too high. And from my own experience, like I remember going into fertility treatment in IVF. So we'd done a year of inseminations, and then I was ready to progress to IVF. But I also knew that my situation at work was very stressful, that I was working long hours, I was doing a lot of overtime. And whenever a project fell apart, I took it on me to fix it and solve it and save it. So I had a discussion with my boss when we started IVF, and I told her, look, I'm starting IVF this month. I I don't want to ruin it by I need to put all of my attention there so I can do my job, but I cannot do all of the extra work that I've been doing. And of course, 1 week into my IVF treatment, another project fell apart at work. And I reminded her of that conversation again, saying, look, it cannot be me right now who's doing the overtime, who's fixing it. And she was like, okay, we'll hire a consultant. We'll fix it another way. And that was such an eye opener to me because I felt like I was irreplaceable. And this is something I discuss a lot with my clients. I see how they all, because generally, a lot of women I work with are overachievers and feel super responsible and are perfectionists. And then So we get into these patterns, and it's really about also experimenting with different ways of being, in your job, and seeing that it's not necessarily all going to fall apart, that there are different things possible. But it starts by setting boundaries and saying, look, things need to change. A second longer term solution is to use co regulation. This is something I love. So, the nervous system, you can regulate it yourself, but it also responds to the nervous systems of people around you. And this happens, when we're infants. This is really beautiful. When you put your baby on your chest, for example, it will regulate its breathing and heartbeat according to your breath and heartbeat. So there's a synchronization that takes place, and that's something that keeps happening throughout our life. So, you've made your list of things that are stressful, and then hopefully you also have a list of things that relax you. And probably one of the things you'll see on there is just these social interactions. Stop meeting with people who make you feel stressed or not good about yourself, but see if there's people on your list that, you go away and you feel just so happy and nourished when when you've gone out for a drink or coffee or whatever. You can also use co-regulation like very physically. So get a massage or get a cuddle. Those are things that will also help you regulate your nervous system. One thing I love doing, and where we incorporate all of these things, are I organize women's circles. So we come together. Usually, we also at some point massage each other, but just by being together, sitting together, sharing our stories, sharing tea, meditating together, there's a collective rebalancing of the nervous system that takes place in those circles, and that's why they're so healing. I always say something happens and it's so hard to put into words, but that's the thing. I think we all leave feeling so much more grounded, so much more connected to our bodies. So it's really the parasympathetic nervous system that is activated in those settings. And that's why it's so important for facilitators to create a really safe environment for women. And you can definitely work with your partner in this as well. I mentioned it the other day on a podcast episode that I think I will publish next week. How I had this one couple that I worked with, and the woman who was going in for treatment, she felt a bit lost. So she tried treatment before. She was scared that it wouldn't work. It was hard for her to stay in a positive mindset, whereas her partner was so like confident that this would work for them. So I worked with them with dance, and I told them like whenever they were going in for treatment, they would schedule or they needed to schedule like an hour in the morning where they could dance together, or maybe it was 30 minutes, right? But they needed to plan a moment where they could dance together. And in that dance, I gave them a playlist as well. Like the woman just needed to be guided or let herself be guided by her partner. And her partner was just connecting to that feeling of confidence. Like this is all going to work out. It was a super beautiful way of co-regulation and making sure that she, was going into treatment, feeling open, receptive, and just held and supported. It's just such a soft space to be in. So it was really amazing. Um, Another thing to focus on when you want to, you know, look at your nervous system regulation more structurally is to really make sure that you rest and that you are not distracting. So, of course, we all know how good it feels when you're tired after a long day, you're stressed out, and then you escape in a book or in Netflix. It's it's amazing, and it doesn't help you calm your nervous system down. It just distracts you from your stress. And I recognize how hard it can be when you're exhausted or when you're so stressed out to then have to do something positive. It feels like it will take more energy, right? But in the long run, it's so much more beneficial because there are so many things you can do that are not distracting, but that will help you recharge and that will really help you, yeah, activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Some things you can do are, of course, yoga or meditation, or I love doing rituals at the moment. So taking half an hour to sit and be and connect to spirit. That's what I do in ritual. But in meditation, it can also be just, clearing your mind, Yoga, it's about connecting to the body. So even if you want to go to Netflix straight away, maybe just say, "Okay, I'll sit for 15 minutes." And then maybe you're sitting for 15 minutes or you're doing some yoga exercises for 15 minutes and you feel like, no, I need to do actually another 15 minutes. But set the bar low, but make sure that you use these tools as a first resort when you're feeling super stressed and tired and exhausted. Another thing you can do, dance or other forms of movement. Again, it's so much easier to calm your body than your mind. So by dancing, you can turn it into a meditative dance or exercising. These are ways um, to help you deal with stress. The only thing, though, that I want to mention here, many women do high intensity training, which puts additional stress on your body. So if this is something that you do a lot, then maybe see if you can turn to a different practice. The same with yoga. Like if you use Bikram yoga, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call it hot yoga, or vinyasa flow, like the very active yoga styles, maybe switch it up a little with yin yoga instead, or anything that's much more restorative yoga, right? Because we don't want to put additional stress on the system. We want to develop strategies that actually help us unwind and that get us in a very relaxed flow state. So movement good, but don't put additional stress on your system. Um, Rather, go walking rather than running. Spend some time in nature or in water. These are excellent ways to, yeah, connect to the world around us, to connect to the moment, to reflect on life, and just to really calm down. And then the final thing I wanted to mention here when it comes to rest instead of distract is get creative. So spark your creativity, start journaling, start painting, start making clay sculptures, whatever it is that you did as a kid. I created a whole episode about this, episode 74 on creativity for fertility, I think it's called. So find ways where you do something just for the sake of doing it rather than because it has to have this super nice end goal. Um, so also recap these three longer term solutions: set boundaries, use co regulation, and rest instead of distract. And now I mentioned so many tools here on this episode. What can be really useful is if you make a list for yourself. So these more short term solutions and longer term solutions that really speak to you, make your own list. So have like 10 shorter term solutions and 10 longer term solutions that you put in a box. And whenever you need some inspiration, you can take that box out and get a card or piece of paper out and see, okay, yeah, and feel what it does when you connect to that exercise or thing. Like you feel it will tell you whether it will nourish you or not. So this is really about starting to feel that desire to get to the very calm state of being. Because once you start connecting to that, um, there's usually, you want more of that. So I hope that was useful. One final note. And there is a hormonal reason why we feel more anxious in the week before you get your period. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but I just want you to know it's normal to feel anxious in that final week of your cycle. So again, don't beat yourself up, but make sure that you create extra space in that week for these practices because it's extra important to regulate your nervous system, especially when you're trying to get pregnant and you're at the end of your 2 week wait and you're stressed out. So create in your schedule, create that extra space so you can really focus on regulating your nervous system. Not because that will help you improve your chances of getting pregnant, although I do feel that is the case. But it's because it's what is needed. It's what your body is really asking you for. So I hope that was useful. Let me know what you think. I also wanted to quickly share that I created something, or I'm going to create something around this. So this is my own nervous system regulation. I had planned to set up a bundle of 10 guided practices to really help you get to that nourished state. It's called Nourished. I have the title already. So there will be guided practices there to help you connect to your womb, your ovaries, to your heart, to spirit, really different ways of getting information from your body about what it is that you need in this process on your fertility journey to get to that place of love, trust, and surrender, and really feel like how you can best regulate your nervous system. But I've had a very hectic month and I gave myself some room, so I still need to put all of this together. But what I did do today was create a sign up page. So not to buy it, but to if you want to be put on the or if you want to put yourself on a wait list, and then there will be a nice bonus for you as well. You can just go to thatfertilefeeling.com/nourished, and there's a box there where you can leave your email, and then I'll get back in touch somewhere over the course of the next month with more information. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. I hope to see you back next week. And if you want to reach out, you can email me at francoise@thatfertilefeeling.com or send me a message on Instagram at thatfertilefeeling. I love to hear from you and I always get back to you. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to That Fertile Feeling, the podcast. If you like what you heard, then please head over to your preferred podcast player and subscribe to the show. It would also be great if you could leave a review and rating so that other listeners can find the show easily. And if you think that anyone you know could benefit from the materials on this show, then go ahead and share it with them. It would be much appreciated. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye, love.